be here at 9 o'clock in the morning. But I'm very thankful, and I think it really indicates your interest in spiritual things. I am very appreciative of the opportunity to be able to speak on this particular lectureship. I am very concerned about our young people, and I'm concerned about parents and us older people setting forth the examples and being able to challenge our young people in the ways that they ought to be challenged, so that we can develop by the power of God the future leaders of tomorrow. My dad used to say that the only way we can have a better country is for us to raise our children better than we were. And I believe that that's the way it ought to be, because our children ought to be able to learn from us what we know and then go on from there, and also go beyond what we have been able to learn. God, when he thought of Abraham, spoke of Abraham, he says, I know Abraham, that he will teach his children, that they will teach their children, and so forth. So we have a tremendous job. We have a lot of young people in our congregation, and so I feel the responsibility there. And I believe that our older people are beginning to feel responsibility more and more that they have toward the young people. We need to restore the home in the church. And we need to restore fathers as the head of families, as it ought to be, by the Word of God. Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but to bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. And that is a big job. It is a big job to be a parent. In the church, we need our young people, and we need our older people too. And I appreciate the lessons that were brought to our hearing last night, and the understanding that we all are in this together, and that we all were young once, and we all are growing older. And the passage, remember thy Creator in the days of thy youth, Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Before the evil days draw nigh, and thou wilt say, I have no pleasure in them. And as I looked at the context of that, and the days of youth, has to do with the days of vitality and strength and power, and when we have all this ability, whether it's from age 13 right on up, because it's contrasted, then it goes into the aging process that takes place after that period of time. It is not true that religion is simply for little children and for old people. It is for the people in the power of their youth, to give the best that they have unto the Lord. And so this is really what this lectureship is all about, is to encourage young people. We need leaders. And if the church is going to grow, it's going to depend upon strong leaders. And I mean leaders that have courage, leaders that are not afraid to speak the truth and do what has to be done, and do a little pushing and a little prodding. That's what leadership is all about. And not let things just slide and slip. But I'm afraid that we have to admit that as older people, we have not always exerted the proper leadership as we ought. And we have not always seen the problems that were out there. And so that's part of what this first lesson will be about. It will be about things that have to do with evolution. And the dinosaurs. Of course, everyone is interested in the dinosaurs, you know. And when your kid does come home, and he says, well, Dad, tell me about the dinosaurs. One thing you probably need to realize already, that they have already been taught quite a bit about the dinosaurs when they ask you that question. But a lot of the things they've been taught is not true. It's not according to what the Bible teaches, but from a standpoint of evolutionary ideas. And so we're going to look at that. And I wanted to emphasize just a minute or two how important it is for us to go back to our foundations. And I mean the foundations, I mean the book of Genesis and believe what God said in the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis is historical narrative, and it deals with the generations of the heavens and the earth. And later on it talks about the generations of Noah, or the generations of Shem, the generations of Terah, and the generations of Jacob. It's historical all the way through. And a lot of people discount the first 11 chapters, especially of the book of Genesis. But that's our foundation. Jesus says in John the 5th chapter, and about the 46th verse, he says, if you do not, talking to the Jews of his day, if you do not believe what Moses wrote, then will you not believe what I say to you? We have to believe what Moses wrote. And so, and I read also in Hebrews the 5th chapter, about the verse 12, where the writer says, when by reason of time you ought to be teachers, you have need again that someone teach you the rudiments of the oracles of God, or the fundamentals of the oracles of God. In that context, I believe that has to do with the Old Testament Scriptures. The rudiments, the foundation. Psalms 11 and verse 3, it says, if the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? Believe me, our foundations are being destroyed today. And so we need to really come to grips with this. And maybe this morning, a few things that I will say will help you to understand the problem. Now, last night, some of you that were not here last night, I handed questionnaires out to everyone in the audience, and I still have a lot more up here. And this was to give me an idea of where we are with reference to evolution, and how much have we been influenced by the teaching of evolution in society. Because we need to realize that we have had a society that's been saturated with this kind of teaching for many, many years. And so the results are interesting. I stayed up until about 12 o'clock last night compiling the results, and so I do have the results with me this morning on that. And I really appreciate you cooperating in that way and filling these things out. I know it's not an easy thing to do, but it really is helpful. So at this time, I want us to look at, it's about a 25-minute film on dinosaurs. And then at the end of that film, I'm going to take up the rest of the time and just go over some of these questions and make a few comments on this. So at this time, we'll look at the film.
Dinosaurs really lived thousands of years ago? Most of us would say yes. But what else do you know about these huge ancient creatures? Were they cold-blooded or warm-blooded? Are they mentioned in the oldest human record, such as the Bible? What if man and dinosaur lived at the same time? Would that affect your life and mine today? How big were they really? We're going to probe into these and other questions in the next 30 minutes. I'm your host, David Maine, and this is Crossroads. Virtually everyone is familiar with the fact that sometime long ago there were huge reptile-like monsters. All of us, even little children, know them as dinosaurs. Although no one has actually seen a living dinosaur, we have a reasonably good idea of their appearance from pictures, such as these which have been reconstructed from fossil evidence. just what do these creatures from the past have to do with us today? Actually, a great deal. There is a particular significance to their discovery. The year is 1770. In the underground chalk quarries near the little town of Maastricht in Holland, two men find a skull with a pair of formidable-looking jaws 4 feet long. News of fossil finds quickly spreads across Europe and causes great controversy. People in those days, for the most part, believed in the biblical account of creation, but nowhere had they ever read of such monsters. Great scientists in the early 1800s, such as Cuvier in France and Buckland in England, saw the fossils as proof of the Genesis account of the Great Flood. In 1841, Professor Richard Owen, a brilliant anatomist at the Royal College of Surgeons in London, proposed the general name Dinosauria, which comes from two Greek words meaning terrible lizard. Life-size models of some of these creatures were shown at the Crystal Palace exhibition in London in 1851, and information about them was first brought to the public attention then. Since that time, much has been learned about dinosaurs. Crossroads visited San Diego, California, and spoke to Dr. Green Gish. Dr. Gish received his doctoral degree in biochemistry at the University of California at Berkeley. He is listed in American Men of Science. Dr. Gish recently published a fine book on dinosaurs, and we asked him to tell us some of the things about dinosaurs that are perhaps less well known.
Apparently, dinosaurs were born from eggs, hatched from eggs. They were reptiles. This is what we would expect, of course. And as a matter of fact, the paleontologists have found fossilized dinosaur eggs, clutches of dinosaur eggs, and in some of these eggs, they've actually found the fossilized embryo of the dinosaurs. So there seems to be little doubt that they all started out as little fellows, having been born from these eggs. And some of them grew into some very large fellows. Dinosaurs occurred in all sizes. Some were small as chickens, and some were as large as almost 100 tons. And there was a complete spectrum of sizes of dinosaurs, and they occurred in many different shapes as well. We find the fossils of dinosaurs all over the world, as a matter of fact. They're found on every continent, from as far north as Spitsbergen to the southern tip of South America. They're found in Europe, and Asia, and Africa, Australia, and all areas of the world. And in considerable numbers, too, as a matter of fact.
Generally, just the hard, bony parts of dinosaurs are preserved as fossils. But Dr. Gish told us that in some rare instances, the impression of their skin has been preserved in the rock. So we know they weren't covered in hair, but appeared like the reptiles of today. We asked Dr. Gish if he thought that dinosaurs were also cold-blooded, like today's reptiles.
Well, there have been some suggestions on that point, and a lot of controversy in the scientific literature concerning whether dinosaurs were warm-blooded or cold-blooded. They were reptiles, and I very strongly suspect that they were cold-blooded. I think there's a tendency among evolutionists to want to believe that they were warm-blooded, because they like to relate the dinosaurs to the birds. Some are claiming that birds evolved from dinosaurs. And so somewhere in between them, you have to get to a warm-blooded stage. And there have been some scientists arguing that the conditions of the bones of these dinosaurs indicated that they had a high state of vascularization. Therefore, they must have been warm-blooded. Well, it's been pointed out that there's living reptiles, which are cold-blooded, have the same sort of vascularization, and there are mammals living today that are all warm-blooded that do not possess that particular state. And so it's not definitive at all. It does not tell us whether these dinosaurs were warm-blooded or cold-blooded. I believe they were cold-blooded creatures.
As we've seen, the early dinosaur investigators found that fossil remains lent considerable support to the biblical account of the Genesis flood. Other men, however, in the last century, such as Charles Lyell or Charles Darwin, preferred not to believe in the biblical account. They introduced the idea that there had been no great catastrophes in the past, but that the evidence of change that we see came about very gradually over immeasurably long periods of time. In 1859, Darwin published his now famous Origin of Species, which clearly presented the theory of evolution. The theory says that all living things are related, and that higher organisms evolved from lower organisms, which in turn were formed in some primordial sea hundreds of millions of years ago. It would be expected from this explanation that most fossil found would be of the intermediate or transitional form. Accepting that evolution is true, then dinosaurs would have had the longest line of transitional forms back to the small creatures from which they originated. The great museums of Europe and North America organized massive dinosaur fossil hunts throughout the whole world, in fact. And there have been now approximately 150 years of museum effort. We asked Dr. Gish about the types of dinosaurs and about evidence of the transitional forms.
Triceratops, for example, has 3 horns, 2 above the orbit, and 1 in the nostril, or the snout area, as you might call it. And he had the 3 horns. That's why the name Triceratops. He weighed about 8 to 10 tons. And in addition to these 3 horns, he had a heavy armor shield protecting the shoulder area, bone several inches thick. There were other horned dinosaurs that had a single horn. Now, these horned dinosaurs, by the way, appear in the fossil record complete. We have no transition forms. We have no evidences of a gradual evolution of these horns or of the shield. There they are all of a sudden with no transitional forms whatsoever. Another interesting dinosaur was the Stegosaurus dinosaur. He had 2 very unusual features. He had no horns on his head, but he did have 4 horns or spikes on his tail. Very effective defense, I'm sure. In addition, he had these very unusual plates along the back. Now, there's been some question, the function of the plates. Were they armor plates or were they heat exchangers? There has been some recent evidences that they were heat exchangers. And I think that's most likely the best solution to the problem. But in any case, they were very unusual structures, the plates and the spikes on the tail. Spikes were about 3 feet long, about 6 inches at the base. And the Stegosaurus appears in the fossil record abruptly, fully formed. Nowhere in the fossil record do we have a suggestion of a transition form showing the origin of the spikes or of the plates. The duck-billed dinosaurs occur in many, many different shapes, you might say, different types of the duck-billed dinosaurs. The Trachodon dinosaur stood about 18 feet tall. And we have other dinosaurs, the horned dinosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs of different sizes and shapes. There are many of these found as fossils. And again, you see, the evolution suggests that the jaws and teeth of some reptile or another dinosaur gradually and slowly evolved into a duck-bill. But there's not one single transition form found anywhere in the world. The duck-billed dinosaurs in their bewildering array of types appear abruptly in every case. And then we have, of course, the meat-eating dinosaurs, the carnivorous dinosaurs. The such as Tyrannosaurus rex, the largest of all, standing perhaps 20 feet tall, with jaws 6 feet long and teeth 6 inches long. And when we look at a fossil of one of those creatures, we no longer wonder why the dinosaurs are called terrible lizards. And that's what the name means. The name dinosaur means terrible lizard. So we have a variety of the meat-eating dinosaurs. No transition forms for these creatures. And then we have the Brachiosaurus dinosaur. Actually, he is the largest dinosaur of all. The Brachiosaurus is believed to have weighed up to 100 tons. He stood as high as a 5-story building, 50 feet high, with a very long neck. Not only was he the largest plant-eating dinosaur of all, but he had the nostrils not located in the snout, as in the case of all other self-respecting dinosaurs, was found in a hollow dome on the top of the head. It was the most unusual arrangement. And there's not a single transitional form showing the migration of the nostrils from the snout to the bony dome on top of the head. There's not a single transitional form showing the origin of these huge plant-eating dinosaurs from San Luis.
As a matter of fact, I have in my library a book called The Encyclopedia of Dinosaurs. And in this encyclopedia is listed every dinosaur of which the authors were aware. And in that book, you cannot find a single example of a transitional form showing the origin of these very unusual dinosaurs in such a tremendous array of sizes and shapes. Now let's face it. If evolution is true, and these dinosaurs have gradually and slowly evolved through millions of years of time from some reptile, why the rocks would be full of these transition forms. It'd be undoubted evidence for their gradual evolution. But as a matter of fact, there is none.
So you see that the fossil record shows that dinosaurs appeared suddenly in great variety and each in perfected form. After 150 years of searching, not one fossil of a transitional creature, say something between a reptile and a mammal, has been found. From this aspect, evolution has not been proven. The only alternative explanation for the origin of life is special creation. However, there is acknowledged to be no proof for this either. So whichever explanation you accept, it's a matter of personal choice, and it must be accepted in faith. The theory of evolution makes the assumption that vast spans of time were involved. Dinosaurs did become extinct, and textbooks tell us that their extinction took place about 100 million years before man evolved. Now, it would be difficult to prove this 100 million year gap between man and dinosaurs. However, we believe that it's possible to provide proof that man and dinosaur lived at the same time. The proof? The Biloxi River.
The Biloxi River runs through the little town of Glen Rose, Texas, about 65 miles southwest of Dallas. At this particular location, the Biloxi cuts through the limestone rock strata. In one particular layer, many foot tracks of large dinosaurs such as the Brontosaurus, Tyrannosaurus, and Trachodon, together with what appear to be human foot tracks, can be found. At the time these impressions were made, what is now hard limestone was soft mud. In some way not yet understood, the soft mud became hard stone. Now this process must have been fairly rapid because of the detail that's been preserved. When the river is in flood, the upper layers of limestone become dislodged and expose the layer containing the footprint. The finest examples of dinosaur and human-like foot tracks are found in freshly exposed limestone because weathering hasn't destroyed their fine details. Local inhabitants have known about the foot tracks for years. Mr. Ted Schreiber, who's now the Glen Rose Park superintendent, is familiar with the interest that museums have had in these tracks.
Behind me here, this straight edge along the riverbank, is where the American Museum, in cooperation with the University of Texas, in 1940 took out a strip of 120 feet, which contained 120 feet of broad, 7 feet wide, which contained 27 beautiful footprints of both kinds. Three-fold and the quadruped type.
Ranger Ted Schreiber went on to tell us that the strip of rock containing the dinosaur foot tracks was divided, and these have since been on display at the American Museum of Natural History in New York and at the Smithsonian in Washington. Mr. Schreiber told us that the 27 footprints have since been on display at Princeton, Baylor, and Southern Methodist Universities, and at the Smithsonian Institution and the American Museum of Natural History of New York. However, only the dinosaur tracks were removed. No mention was ever made of the human-like tracks in the same vicinity. The National Geographic magazine published an article in the May 1954 issue about these tracks, but again, no mention was made of the human-like prints. In 1969, a film was made entitled Footprints in Stone. This excellent documentary clearly shows both human-like and dinosaur foot tracks. Great care was taken during the making of this film to dam up parts of the Biloxi River, then follow the foot tracks and excavate fresh tracks beneath the river embankment. Although no single perfect impression was found, the impressions generally consisted of an incomplete heel, the ball of a foot, or a few toes, while they were seen to be spaced apart, left foot, right foot, indicating that they were produced by a two-legged individual. In some sets of these tracks, the foot impressions were larger than the normal human foot, and the spacing correspondingly longer. This indicates that the individual was bigger than man today. Now, practically every culture in the world has stories and traditions about giants long ago. Even the Bible itself speaks of there being giants in ancient times. Both sets of these bipedal tracks crisscross the dinosaur track. The film producers invited a number of scientists and geology experts to make a first-hand inspection and offer their opinions. All acknowledged that the tracks looked in every way human. But two university professors of geology added that since they were in the Cretaceous limestone and therefore out of place according to the geological timetable, they could not accept that they were produced by human beings.
Did you notice the deductive reasoning of these men? When presented with evidence which does not fit the theory of evolution, the evidence is denied rather than questioned the theory. A truly scientific approach would be inductive reasoning. When presented with evidence which does not fit the theory, the evidence is verified, acknowledged, and then the theory re-examined. We returned to Dr. Greendish, himself a scientist, and asked him about the Paluxy River foot tracks.
There's some excellent footprints of dinosaurs preserved there in the Cretaceous limestone. And in that same Cretaceous limestone, the same level, we have footprints of man. That is, footprints with 5 toes, a ball, and a heel, every indication being human footprints. If they were found anywhere else, no one would doubt that they were human footprints. But because they're found there with the dinosaur footprints, the evolutionists refuse to accept this evidence. But the evidence is there, and it is excellent evidence. And in one place, the human footprints actually overlap side of the dinosaur.
We asked Dr. Gish if there was any mention of dinosaurs in the Bible. Bearing in mind the name dinosaur wasn't coined until 1841, so we couldn't expect a biblical description of such creatures to have included the word itself.
I think so. In the book of Job, in the 40th chapter, we read of the behemoth. And beginning in the 15th chapter, the 15th verse of the 40th chapter of Job, and the description there is very, very similar to a dinosaur. Actually, it describes nothing that we know living upon the earth today. It describes a very, very large creature, one who just thinks he can drink up a river, and doesn't even have to hurry about it.
In these verses, the Lord is speaking to Job. Behold thou the behemoth, which I made with thee. He eateth grass as an ox, he with his tail like a cedar. His bones are like bars of iron. Behold, he drinketh up a river and hasteth not. He can draw up the Jordan into his mouth.
Then Job either had seen a dinosaur, or it was the living dinosaurs had been recent enough in history that his father or his grandfather or his great-grandfather had described it. And so they had this knowledge of dinosaurs.
Dr. Gish went on to explain that because the tail of the behemoth is described as a cedar, this can in no way refer to the tail of an elephant or a hippopotamus, but rather that of a brontosaurus. Dr. Gish gave us another interesting example.
The Leviathan described in the 41st chapter of Job, first of all, it spent a lot of time in the water, it spent a lot of time on land. It speaks of a weapon that man attempted to use against him very ineffectually. Some were the water-dwelling type. You couldn't hook him, you couldn't pull him up out of the water like you could a fish. The Bible says, furthermore, arrows and javelins and weapons of this kind were ineffectual against him, so it indicates that he spent time on land and water as well. But the most remarkable thing about the Leviathan was the fact that he actually breathed fire. We always think of these dragons as being mythological, non-existent, but the tales, the stories of dragons occur in cultures all over the world with very widespread legend, and widespread legends are usually based upon real historical creatures or events. Furthermore, I believe there is some evidence, possibly indicating that the dinosaurs could do this. The duck-billed dinosaurs, for example, they'll have hollow domes on top of their heads with channels leading down into the mouth and the throat. in the nostril. And nobody's ever been able to figure out why they have this particular type of anatomy. What did they use this for? Well, I'm only suggesting, of course I wasn't there, I wasn't an eyewitness to this, but I believe they very likely had a chemical mechanism whereby they could perform this, actually breathe fire and smoke, as the Bible says. We have the little bombardier beetle, which has a remarkable defense mechanism, chemical mechanism, where he can expel hot gas. He's at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, that isn't boiling imported water. And I just say if the little bombardier beetle could do that, or something similar to it, the dinosaur, very likely, very possibly could have had a chemical mechanism, not identical to, but similar to it, whereby it could ignite these chemicals and breathe out these very hot vapors, hot enough to ignite wood, for example. The bombardier beetle uses a hydroquinone, which is oxidized by hydrogen peroxide in the bombardier beetle. Of course, the mechanism could have included something like hydrogen peroxide as the oxidizing agent, and some other chemical as a reducing agent, which would generate this very violent chemical reaction.
Today we've examined some of the facts which cannot be accounted for by the theory of evolution. These facts are not generally reported in textbooks or the secular press. Evidence for the coexistence of man and dinosaur should be a new scoop of the century. Yet blind disbelief refuses to even report the facts. After all, to accept this means a total collapse of the theory of evolution. We've all been told repeatedly that hundreds of millions of years are involved in the Earth's history, yet the evidence piles up against it. Men have dedicated their life to this one theory, this one cause. Could they now admit that the theory is invalid and that their life has been wasted? Honesty under these circumstances would come at a high price. We believe that God, in his mercy to unbelieving man, is revealing in these days more and more evidence to substantiate his creation account.
We hope you've enjoyed this program. For more information about today's subject, write to us.
Okay, we don't have a lot of time, but I did want to touch a little bit on some of the questions, the questionnaires. What I did, I took the age from 25 downward, and most of those were teenagers, and put them together, and then the age 26 above, and I put those together. And so I compiled most of it that had to do with the younger generation here. And the wrong answers were about 23%. The wrong answers and I don't know answers were 52%. And the correct answers were about 48%. And this is about don't feel disturbed because it's, well, you should feel disturbed. But what I mean is don't think that's unique. That's the same thing we had in our congregation with our young people. And that really began to wake us up that they need a lot of teaching so far as what is creation and what is evolution, and to be able to distinguish between the two. Now, I do want to just look at a few of these here. Most people do believe dinosaurs exist. There were some that said no, they do not exist, and some that say that they did not know whether or not they existed. But I don't believe there's any question that dinosaurs existed. There are just millions and millions of fossilized bones all over the world, in parts all over the world. Bert Thompson listed about 22 different places in southwest United States where they have large deposits of dinosaur bones. So they did exist. Another question I can't touch on all these at all, but number 6 here is, who are cavemen, or who were cavemen? And the prominent answer among the young people was primitive men who lived before modern man. Now, that's an evolutionary answer. That's not a biblical answer. And the correct answer would be men of any age who lived in caves. We have cavemen today, in fact. But, and this gets to something else. The number 7 is man becoming more intelligent all the time? Now, the young people didn't know some of the answers, and they were honest. They put, I don't know. But in this one, they were absolutely certain that they knew the answer. And that is almost every one except 5 put down that man is becoming more intelligent all the time. That's an evolutionary teaching, whether you know it or not. We're not becoming more intelligent all the time. And some people have the idea that, Adam, he just wasn't very smart and he didn't have much intelligence. But we need to remember that when God created male and female, he did in the beginning, we might point out, as Jesus says, Matthew 19, verse 4, that in the beginning he made them male and female. But he said that his creation was very good. So how he made Adam was very good. And that's intellectually, genetically, in every way. Adam was a perfect man. And it takes a great deal of intelligence to have all of the animals come before you and be able to name them according to their characteristics. And that's what Adam did. So Adam was very intelligent. And I don't think any of us today compare with Adam. Now, it is true that we ought to be able to pass on to our children more knowledge than we have. And that's true. We have a kind of a shocker today. Today, according to statistics, we have the first generation in American history that does not know more than the previous generation. We've had 20-some-odd years, except for this past year, of a steady decline in academics in America. And these are according to well-established facts and reports, government reports and so forth. And so we have a real problem today. We have a challenge today for us and for our young people. Another one I wanted to touch on is the 10th one. How long does it take to produce a primitive race of people? And one answer was hundreds and thousands of years. And that was the predominant answer by the young people. 5 did say 1 generation, which is correct. 14 did say, I don't know. But it only takes 1 generation of untaught people to produce a primitive race. Because if we don't pass on to our children what we know, they're not like animals that they do things by instinct. They do it through language and through teaching and so forth. And so the hippies would be an example. You take a hippie community that does not pass on to the next generation the knowledge of civilization and so forth, you produce a primitive race in 1 generation. And we have primitive races today upon the face of the earth. And that's why teaching is so important. And here's one I have to mention. And the answer was wrong almost every time by adults as well as young people. And did the same thing in our congregation. Evolution involves a study of science, while creationism involves a study of religion. And that's not true. But the prominent answer was yes. But this is what's being taught. We have tried in America to get a balanced treatment in the public schools of evolution and creation, and we're not succeeding. We didn't succeed in Arkansas, and it's not going too well in Louisiana. In California, they did get some kind of balanced treatment law, but now they're being sued because there's not the evolutionary part in the textbook is not strong enough, and so there's problems. I know Brother Ward Ellsworth from Washington State, and I have a lot of his materials where he has pushed for balanced treatment in the public school of creation and evolution side by side. Both of them are faith systems, And both of them can be looked at from a scientific viewpoint. And there's a debate that I listened to recently that's outstanding, and I have it in the notes there in the back on the references. You can order it by a creationist, by a Christian, Buddy Payne, and by an evolutionist, Lovell, and strictly debating the question on a scientific viewpoint. The Bible wasn't even brought into the discussion, and this would be the way it would be discussed in the text in the classroom. And it was tremendous discussion, and so you ought to have that. Okay, another one I wanted to touch on is 18. How does a fossil form? And this is almost wrong. Almost everyone was wrong in this. It forms quickly under special conditions. It's the only way you can have a fossil. You have to have something that's buried quickly or covered quickly, because anything that lays on top of the land or just dies and falls to the bottom of the sea or ocean decays, and there's no fossilization that can possibly take place. You've got to have a catastrophe of some kind to develop the conditions whereby things can fossilize. And they don't develop gradually over a long period of time. And I believe that the reason we have so many fossils upon the earth, even of sea life in the mountains and so forth, is the flood. I believe that is the main reason. And of course we don't have time to go into all that. But it deals with catastrophe, the making of fossils. Here's one that I didn't count this one in the compilation of the records because I thought it was too tough. But when we dig up fossils, we're digging up the past is the primary answer that was given, almost the exclusive answer. But we're not digging up the past, we're digging up the present. A fossil lives in the present. It exists in the present, doesn't exist in the past. But what happens here is that you see some time-life display of all the missing links, and you have the evolving of primitive man, they say, or ape-like man, right on up to modern man. And people have the impression that we're digging those things out of the earth or something, digging up. No, we're not digging those things up. If you put all of those so-called missing links, you can put them in a small box. All of the bones of the missing links and teeth and so forth that they have found. No, they find them in the earth and then they reconstruct. And most of it is according to their imagination. So we need to understand what fossils are, the things we find in the present. And they don't come out of the ground looking like these creatures and so forth. Okay, that was my only point there, but I didn't count that against anyone on that. Did God create heavens and the earth and all living things in 6 literal days? And I believe the answer is yes. Now, I've put the reasons down in the notes because I believe this is very important, that we believe what God says, period. We believe what God says. And we test everything else in the light of what God says. God is going to be proven true and also scientific, whatever God says. And so even though modern science might not agree with what God says at this particular point in time, God is still true, and it'll prove itself to be true. Well, God made it clear, I believe, in the Genesis 1, that He created in 6 literal days, because He defined day. Day doesn't always mean 6 literal hours, 6 literal hours, but He defined day, evening and morning, one day. And there's a lot of other reasons why that's the case too. Moses said in Exodus 20 and verse 11 that in 6 days God created the heavens and the earth. That's what Moses said. And He rested on the 7th day. Well, anyway, our time is up. And I hope this will kind of stir you up and increase your interest in this subject. And if anyone wants any of these of Ward Ellsworth on equal treatment in the public school, I'll be glad to talk to you about those. Thank you very much.